Welcome to Miss Win Checking In, the space where creativity meets healing. Here, we explore the path of mindful expression through the lens of writing, wellness, and soulful storytelling. Take a moment to pause and ask yourself, how are you feeling right now? If you're watching this on YouTube, drop an emoji in the comments to represent how you're feeling. And then let's check in at the end. Let's take a deep breath, tune in, and prepare to create from within. Hey, it's Miss Win checking in, and I'm back with another meaningful conversation. Today, I have special guest Caralyn. Caralyn, what do you know about writing about mental health challenges?
Well, first, hello, and thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Writing about mental health challenges I love it. I like
Mm,
it's if I could just write about mental health like all day, every day, I would love doing it. And the thing that I love about it is that, well, I don't love necessarily that I can relate to the topics,
yeah.
but for me, that makes it so much easier to write about it because I'm living most of my topics that I cover are from real life experiences. And I think
Mm,
that's so important in mental health writing because there's so many misconceptions and stigmas and judgments, and just there's not always like the real deal information out there with stuff like that.
mm-hmm. Yeah. So you got started with writing about mental health because of your own experiences. Do you mind sharing one of those? Not
Oh,
whatever you can
absolutely.
share, whatever you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have struggled with depression and anxiety.
Mm,
I'm gonna say most of my life. I think like in childhood and like adolescence, it was kind of just, you chalk it up as, oh, she's moody or she's going
mhm,
through puberty. It's just those hormones. But I truly think that for sure the depression was a big thing. Like I'd come home from school and just go to sleep. I was like
mm,
really withdrawn and isolated. I really didn't understand the full effects of the depression and anxiety until I was an adult. And
mhm.
I have my degree in psychology, so obviously like I
Okay.
learned it in school, but it's such a different thing when you learn it from like a clinical aspect
Mhm,
compared to knowing. I think if I would have known that it's hard for people to shower or you
mhm,
need that extra shove to get out of bed in the morning. I don't Maybe now they teach those things a little bit better, but I feel like when I was going to
mhm,
school, I just didn't know that side of it. So I didn't even really talk about it with anybody because I kind
mhm,
of also didn't know if it was depression or was I lazy, was I burned out, was I tired. So about it's an interesting story how my blog came about. I
mhm,
wanted to start it back in like 2018. I was married at the time,
mm,
and my now ex-husband, I was like, "Yeah, I'm thinking of starting a blog or whatever," and he laughed and was like,
mm,
"Well, why? Who told you that's a good idea? Or like, why would you do that?" And that like crushed my spirit so
mm.
bad because first of all, that's supposed to be my husband and you're pretty much like questioning like an ambition or like a passion that I have.
Mhm,
And so when he did that, unfortunately, I let that get to me and I never really visited it again until just last year. I just started my mental health blog last November.
wow.
Um, and before that, due to schooling, I've written about psychology my whole schooling pretty much. I
Mm,
had submitted some articles for publication, but I never really did it on the level that I'm doing now. And so the end of last October, I was supposed to be taking another route because I was kind of just opening up about my personal experience with trauma and domestic violence and my
mm,
mental health. But I ended up in kind of a tricky situation with a PR person. And so I kind of had everything mapped out. And then when that fell through, I was like, you know what? Now's the time. I'm going to start this blog. I don't know
Mhm.
really what the heck I'm doing. I know how to write, but
Yeah.
I'm going to just put it out there. If people like it, they like it. If two people like it, that's better than none. And
Mhm.
so I just kind of dove in there. And my academic experience with writing, I think, has helped me a lot.
Mhm.
But it did also hinder me at the beginning because I wasn't as confident with like personal narrative writing as opposed to academic
Okay.
writing. It's very cut and
Yeah.
dry. This person said this in this year and it supports this evidence. So that was like a real challenge. But I was like, I'm so sick of sitting on the sidelines, of letting naysayers like make me not believe in myself. I'm just going to go for it.
Mhm.
And, so far it's off and running at a good pace, I would say. It seems to be
Yeah.
getting a good reaction, and it's very cathartic to be able to kind of unleash some of that stuff that you carry around. And it helps kind of with the shame that's associated with mental
Mhm.
illness. So it's been like probably just as healing for me as it hopefully is for other people when they, read my blog posts.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Wow. It's so interesting. The last podcast that I was doing, we were talking about some of that grief and I was sharing with her my story about going through domestic violence and how I was working at nonprofits for a while until I really had to deal with my own healing after helping so many other people meet theirs. And man, writing was it for me. Like even now I have journals and journals and journals on journals.
Yeah, me too.
And I think I've always had a blog. I remember having a friend, she's like, girl, you've always had a blog, you've always had a website. But also being in the academia world, I think I was in school for a really long time. Part of that was being in a abusive relationship with a guy I met in college. Took me 7 years to get my bachelor's degree. I went to maybe 4 or 5 different universities, just
Yeah,
all over the place. But where was I going with that? So I was going to school to be a journalist. So getting talking about the structure. So as a journalist you have to write in a certain way. It's called, I believe it's called the pyramid. It's a pyramid diagram that you have to write in. It's the who, what, where, when, why,
yeah,
how, get a quote, that kind of thing. And I
yeah.
remember getting at my last year, getting ready to graduate, I told my journalist teacher, I said, I don't think that I'm supposed to be doing this. Like, I want to write, I want to tell stories. I said, but we get a lot of stories that I want to add on. And I said, I know you can't add on to the news. Back then, you still like, you had to be objective. There wasn't no
Yeah,
left, media and right media. We were taught to be journalists as you have to be neutral in that time. And so it was like, I said, I'm bored with this. I'm bored of telling just cut and dry stories. I said, I
yeah.
want to lie a little bit. I said, I want to lie. I want to imagine. And she's like, well, it sounds like you want to be an author. I said, I think I want to be an author. And she said, well, maybe you should go work for a publishing company. I said, okay, I'm going to go work for a publishing company. I said, well, what do you think I can do at a publishing company? She's like, well, you could probably be an editor. You're a really good editor for newspapers. Anyway, long story short, that's kind of how like when I got out of the mental health field, I started leaning more into being an author publisher. And just coming back around with this podcast, I've been able to kind of marry the two. So I do my author publisher business, but talking about mental health, this is, my bag. Like this is what I want to do. I want to
Yeah.
talk about mental health. I want to, and so that's why we're here today. And so I'm so
Yeah.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited that you leaned in and said, you know what, I'm going to trust myself regardless of what
Yes.
anybody says, because you never know who you're helping or who's watching. And that has been something that
Yes.
I've learned is like with this podcast, I was like, okay, I expect at least 10 people to say yes. What? I did not expect 35 people to say yes and 26 of them to actually follow through.
Oh, that's
And so when that
awesome.
happened, I said, oh, okay.
Yep, you're on the right track.
I'm on the right
Yeah.
track. Yeah. And
Aw.
so definitely, I don't know how far you are in your, writing and sharing, but man, keep going. Keep going. Stay in it for the long haul and
Yes.
do it and do it fearless, let that fear go. And so I don't know where
And
that came from, but I just felt like I needed.
you know what though too? I think only can speak for myself, but as a survivor of abuse, I feel like when you've been through unimaginable circumstances, having to be patient with building a blog is literally like the easiest thing I can do in life
Hmm.
compared to the stuff that I've overcome and been through. It's like, I gotta wait 20 years for my blog to grow. Sure. I don't have to
That's
deal with abuse. Yeah, I'll sit and wait for a blog to
okay.
grow,
Yeah.
So it's
Hmm.
amazing that you can turn those like hardships and the adversity into something positive. And I feel like at some point, yeah, of course you want to make money. Of course you want to gain
Yeah.
followers. But at the end of the day, it's just about being able to like heal yourself and in the
Hmm.
process be able to heal people. And it's interesting when you think about a blog, you don't really have like a face to who's there. And there's something like
Yeah.
really cool about that to me is that people can go out there and maybe they don't feel comfortable talking about mental health. And that's why
Mhm.
I try to be as authentic as possible on my blog. So somebody out there who wonders like, oh my gosh, is there someone else out here who maybe misses brushing their teeth because they didn't have the energy, whatever, because that's
Yeah.
the part of mental health that people don't talk about. I didn't talk about it for the longest time, and I just started to because
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't want to carry that around anymore, number one. And I want to
Mhm.
be able to help someone else not have to carry that around. And if it has to be anonymously and that we
Yeah.
never know who this person is, at least somebody's out there and feels like they're not alone. And that is the most important thing. I'm sure you can relate
Hmm.
having been through, abuse and stuff, that
Hmm.
alone feeling it's unimaginable because
Yeah.
you have friends who don't understand why are you with this person. You have the abuser there. They've also cut you off from people. So you
Mm-hmm.
like truly are alone. And that's like the worst feeling. And I never want other people, I mean, I know other people will feel that way, but if I can
Yeah.
have someone not feel that way for like 30 seconds, I
Hmm.
feel like I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And that's the thing, shame and guilt, holy cow. So I worked at a nonprofit for victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. And one of the things that we learned, which is still true today, and I've been out of the field for almost 5 years now, 75% of women between the ages of 18 and I believe it's like 32 will experience domestic violence in their lifetime. They will. This is a
Yeah.
guarantee. They will. 75%, 3 out of 4 women. That's a high number,
Yeah.
right? And that number right there, one, you're not alone. And okay, you're not alone. To me, that's not necessarily a good thing, but like you're not alone. So I just need to say, like,
Yeah.
you're not alone. If you've experienced, it could be mental, physical, emotional, financial,
Yes.
spiritual, sexual, all of
Yeah.
those things, you know, and we just go through it. But that shame and that guilt keep us from sharing our stories verbally and through writing. I remember one time I wanted
Absolutely.
to like publish a book with different stories from survivors and it never did happen. Never did happen.
Really?
Just maybe it was the marketing, maybe it was
Yeah.
like it could have been different reasons, but in my mind at the time I thought, "Oh, like people actually don't really want to share their story because of that shame and of that guilt and we blame ourselves
Yes.
like oh I remember when I was going through it and I was working at the nonprofit one of my supervisors said Aurelia how did you not know that you were going through this like this is textbook like this is what you teach here and it was like well, fudge. Like, if y'all see me going through it, why nobody said nothing? Like, why did nobody say,
Right.
Gabby, he's abusing you? Like, why did nobody say nothing to me? Like, oh, we just
Yeah.
thought you knew. No, I was in love with the guy. I was
Yeah,
blinded by love. Like, why didn't nobody say, girl, that's not love? Like, girl, you should probably love yourself more. And like, this is what it looks like. Like, I didn't know. And I'm
me
like,
either.
that shame and guilt after that was like, oh, but I just continued to go to work and live life.
Yeah,
And I remember the same supervisor said, "Girl, you were so strong." And I barked at her, "Girl, I haven't dealt with it. Like I have not dealt with it. I've continued to come to work and shame and guilt tells me to just continue to go to work, to not speak about it, to not write
yeah.
about it." And I remember her saying, "Well, one day you'll be able to tell your story." What? I wanted to give her the finger, but I'm like, okay, if I do that, you're gonna fire me. So, but it caught up to me though. You can only deal with shame and guilt for so long until
Yeah,
it
y-
overflows.
absolutely. And I've been at that point too. I had a suicide attempt
Mm,
because of this was after I was sexually assaulted. And yeah, the shame of, I mean, just shame in general. Yeah, it's very suffocating. It's just a
mm-hmm.
suffocating thing. And it's like, no, you feel like people don't understand. Even if you talk to like a therapist, I mean,
Yeah.
God bless them, but it's like you still just, I don't know, you just kind of feel like alone and just, and that's why writing has always, I've been writing since I could write. Even as a kid, I had diaries and journals. I
Mm-hmm.
would
Yeah.
sometimes write my mom a note instead of like speaking to her because it was more
Yeah.
comfortable for me to write. Like that rejection, I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
really know if I wrote it. I don't know. For some reason, the rejection was different for me if I wrote something to her rather than like verbalizing her it, and then her like saying, no, you can't do that. I don't know. It was a
Mm-hmm.
very strange thing, but writing's always been like my friend. Like I would talk to my journal, like, hey, journal, what's up? How was your day? You know,
Yeah.
like that was like my friend. Writing's
Mm-hmm.
always been there for me. And I hope, if there's other writers out there who are afraid to start doing it, like do it, especially if you're a
Mm-hmm.
trauma survivor, there's just something that you've been holding on to for years and years, like writing, even if nobody reads it. I've written letters to myself to like as part of my healing process. And no one's going to see it, but just like
Mm-hmm.
getting it out of your system is
Yeah.
what is really important.
Yeah, that release is so important. And like you said, just writing it down, even if nobody sees it, that is
Yes.
okay. Get it out there. Know that these experiences were real. You experienced it was real, you know?
Yeah.
And I know for some people, I was having, a discussion about, writing about mental health challenges. And they said, they write their story, but they also have a therapist because for them, it's like writing their story also triggers them, dealing with
Yeah.
the PTSD. And I said, I understand. I was diagnosed with chronic PTSD. And so having
Okay.
those flashbacks and being feeling like you're, back in those spaces. I said
Yeah.
it can be really difficult.
It
But
can.
something in the last recording that I did with Kristen, and we said, you know what? You get stronger though. Somehow, if you're a believer, you're spiritual, whatever you
Yeah.
believe in, the divine, something higher than you, something there gives you strength. Hope
Yeah.
gives you strength to keep on going, and it's different. I said this time 5 years ago, I don't know if I would have been able to share my story without having some sort of reaction. I said, but now 10 years has passed, I'm a little bit stronger. I can say, these things, but even then I still, there's a book that I've been working on around my trauma story. It's hard for me to write it. It's hard for
Uh,
me to go back and look at what I wrote. I'm just like, it's really heavy
yeah.
for me. So I'm like, okay, maybe there's work there. But at the same time, I'm like, you know what? Maybe this is not for me to share with others. My goal was to write it and to publish it and share it. And I said, you know what? Maybe it's not for me to share with others. Maybe this was just for me at that time to
Yeah.
to release it, to let it go, to just put it in writing.
Yeah.
But that goal of making it a book was what I needed at that time to actually write it.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
so,
that's interesting.
yeah, I just recently came to that conclusion like, you know what? Maybe it's actually not meant to be finished. Maybe this is just one of those projects that was just for me, even though it started out as something that I wanted to share in writing. It just never got around to it. Never got around to it. And so I said, maybe it was just for me, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense totally. And I'll say I'm definitely at a point now, like in my healing journey, where I can write about things. However, everybody's experiences are different, and I can
Mm-hmm.
completely understand how it's healing for people, but probably not how it is for me. Like for me, I can write about pretty much all these experiences and be fine. I'm not going to have like any spirals or episodes the next
Mm,
day, but I can't imagine, for other people that stuff is just still so real. And yeah, putting things on
mm-hmm.
paper always brings anything to life,
Yeah.
good or bad, love, hurt, sadness,
Mm-hmm.
anger, whatever it is. And, I guess in some cases you just got to be ready for it.
Yeah. Yeah. You just got to be ready for it, whatever, because something might come up and next thing you don't even know.
Yeah, so
What
I'm at
happened?
that point in life where I walk out the front door like, "Hey, what's coming today?"
Okay. Yeah. I'm ready for
I'm
anything,
ready.
baby. Yeah. Yeah. So when you're writing about mental health challenges, other than from your own experiences, how do you ensure that the information that you're sharing is accurate and then also sensitive to maybe those who might be currently experiencing them?
Yes. So, because of the academic background, I'm a huge stickler for using research, but not just any research. Like,
Mhm.
I verify this is like an actual study. I make sure, if it's a study about, oh, these rats ran in circles, therefore this is a good healing mechanism. I'm probably not going to use that as supportive
Yeah.
research because credibility and reliability and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and as far as like the sensitive things, I haven't probably even gone to the depths of my writing yet. I don't think in my blogging, but I have safeguards in place currently. Like I put a disclaimer at the bottom, like this is just informational and educational. I
Yeah.
am not a therapist. Seek out a
Mhm.
licensed therapist. I put trigger warnings
Yeah.
if I'm going to be talking about sensitive things. I've now opened up my blog to guest blogging. So, I looked up all the things I need to cover on my
Yeah.
end of things, like ethically,
Mhm.
with confidentiality and that type of stuff. So that's why I say my academic background has helped me because it gives me a little bit of an edge on knowing
Yeah.
maybe like the right kind of research. And as far as like topics, I definitely had to learn the search engine optimization stuff, which is really not as tricky as it
Yeah.
sounds. I was like, that's all it is. I'm like, I've got to be missing a step. It sounds so much more complicated.
Mhm.
But I definitely utilize that in terms of how I structure a topic. And if it's a topic that's not really hitting
Mm.
on the searches, I probably don't post it. I have some blog posts on there that I'm sure are not hitting any keyword searches because I think I want to have some
Mhm.
things on there that are a little more personal because not everybody
Yeah.
responds well to like a more clinical, like academic approach. So I'm kind of finding like my balance still, I think, with my writing style on that. I don't even know if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, I think you
Okay.
did. Yeah, you talked about the sensitivity and then
Okay.
the accuracy absolutely to those experiencing them. Yeah, and I think
Okay.
just being authentic. You're sharing those different parts of you, the academic side, the creative, the person who's experienced
Yeah.
it, the person who's also studied it. Like,
Yeah.
even for me, I went to school for a little while to become a marriage and family therapist. That was what my I was gonna get a graduate degree in that. But going through my own experience, I wanted to work with victims of domestic violence still, and I
Yeah.
just could not. The the coursework was really, which was so crazy. I had done enough coursework to be able to start doing as a therapist you have to get so many hours to graduate. So I
Yeah.
was getting ready to step into the field to start working, and I couldn't do it. I said I don't think I can hear any more stories after I had already worked in the field.
Yeah.
I've sat in front of children who were abused by family. In most cases, it was family members that was
Yeah.
abusing them, not the boyfriend that you just met. And those things do happen, but a lot of times it was
Yeah.
family members, people who were already close, had been close for years. I'm like,
Yes.
I thought when I was getting this training that, oh, I'm strong. I wasn't moved as emotionally by it, but I want to say one day I had to go to a training, and it was with we had a training with our nonprofit. We had a training with nurses, local nurses. We had a training with police department, and just some of the key people that deal with victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. And in the training, they showed a video of an officer being strangled, and that was it for me. I was like, I'm done with this work. I'm
I
done.
don't
I
blame
was
you.
so triggered. I was so
Oh,
triggered. I couldn't even. I remember getting up, telling my supervisor, and she was like, "You don't look good. It's okay if you go home." I said, "I cannot do any more of this." And they told us, they warned us, but at that time I was like, "I'm so
yeah.
strong. I can deal with this. I can do it." Nope.
Oh,
And that just led me, but I'm so grateful because it led me on my own healing journey. It led me on, I said, you know what? I still want to help people, but I can do it in my own way. I don't have to hear the stories. I don't have to I don't
yeah.
even reading. I tell authors, if you are gonna share a traumatic story, please, a trigger warning, I'm gonna skip that part. Like I'm not
Yeah.
gonna read your
Yeah.
story. I've heard enough of
Absolutely.
it. 5, 6 years, I'm good on those trauma stories. But
Yeah.
you know, I mean, it is what it is. And so, but I understand that they're important, right? It's
Yes.
important, especially if maybe you haven't been through it or you know someone who's going through it. It's important to get those stories out there. What, other than it being kind of cathartic, what are some other reasons why you share your story?
I I think, well, there's a lot of reasons. One, I've just been silenced, for
Mm,
so many years, just about a lot of different things. And I have a son, and it's like I have to do things differently. There's some generational, I don't like to call them generational curses. I like to call it like a pattern. The curse thing
mm-hmm,
just implies like just such an evil thing. And a lot of these things that we learn from our parents, they don't even really know that they're teaching us those things that they shouldn't be because
mm-hmm,
they didn't learn it from their parents. So it's just when you become a parent, I don't know, it just kind of pushes you to kind of the things you've been putting off. It's time to address
yeah,
those things now. So
mm-hmm,
that's number one. And number two, I just, especially as a woman of color, a minority,
mm-hmm,
I just have noticed within a lot of minority populations, and I know a lot of it is a cultural thing, but mental health is just
mm-hmm,
really misunderstood. It's really misunderstood. And I want to do all that I can to help people understand a little bit better. I mean, I'm a believer that I'm not going to ever push someone to go see a therapist. That doesn't work for everybody.
yeah,
Now, I would recommend it in a lot of cases if you can't handle things on your own that you should. But I want to offer kind of like kind of an objective view of mental health, but I'm still trying to push like awareness, but
mm-hmm,
just like to tell people sometimes therapy is not the right fit. Sometimes you have to meet 10 different therapists before you find one. Sometimes medication is good, sometimes it's not. Like I want to just offer like a more open perspective of things so that someone can at least be like, "Oh, I've never considered that." And then whatever they choose to do with that along the way is up to them. So
Mhm.
I can't be like, "Yes, mental health," and then that's where it stops.
Yeah.
I wanna stop being that person that's, like, sitting in the corner, the wallflower, and I just wanted to just speak out about mental health because it's just something it wasn't something talked about in my own family, to be honest with you.
Mhm.
And it's just important now more than ever. As we know, this world is full of shenanigans
Mhm.
of
Mm.
many varying different degrees, and mental health just needs to be talked about for our kids, for everybody. I mean,
Yeah.
there's just a need to talk about it, but not necessarily like and this is nothing against therapists or any type of therapy or school of thought, but I just think we
Mhm.
need a few more voices out there that are just kind of keeping it real, but without like an agenda. Does that make sense? Because I do have an
Mhm.
agenda, and the agenda is
Mm.
awareness, but my agenda is not to push my beliefs on you. It's
Yeah.
really now I hope that you take away some of the things that I would like you to. But if anything, I just want to open people's eyes. I'm not here to even change
Mhm.
anyone's mind per se about mental health. I hope that I can, but
Mhm.
I just, if anything, want somebody to be like, oh, I never considered that before. Because I think there's a lot
Mhm.
of situations out there where people would say that merely because they don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, to offer a different perspective, I think,
Yeah.
when a lot of people are talking about mental health, and that was something that I talked about in another episode, just like I said, okay, every episode people have mentioned writing as a way to heal. So I said, "Can you give me something else?" And she said, "Yes, I can." And she was a therapist. So I said, "Don't tell us to write." I said, we've heard that from everybody. And I said, "Can you give me something else?" She said, "A feelings wheel." She said, "A lot of times people struggle with identifying words for what they were feeling." So she recommended having a feelings wheel. When you're sharing how you're feeling, having the wheel out can be helpful. I said, okay, that was good. That was good. And so it
Yeah.
was a different perspective. But I like that. Knowing options. I'm an options girly. What are my options?
Yes.
Therapy's an option. What
Yes.
else? Like what else can I do to get
Yes.
better mentally? Oh, there's these other things. And so I like that you're saying, bringing awareness, that's so key, especially because our parents, I can talk to my dad about it. He's like, we weren't talking. My dad's 65. He's like, we were not talking about mental health. Like, we didn't even know. We weren't aware that that was a thing. He said it was your generation that really started talking about mental health. And he said, in our generation, he said, when you were a little girl, he said it was, don't do drugs because drugs was key when
Right.
he was like in his 30s. And he's like, now he's
Right.
like, you're in your 30s. He's like, you guys are talking about mental health now. And he's like, I wonder what this next generation is going to be talking about. And I said, yeah, I said it will probably still be mental health
I think
because
so.
a lot of
Yeah.
issues are rooted in unhealthy mindset or unhealthy programming, unhealthy
Yes.
experiences that then create unhealthy beliefs, and all of these things, they all play a role into the life that we have. And so it's like,
Absolutely.
yeah, mental health, we need to content. This is something that we can talk about forever, for years and years and years. And I just feel like it's never enough. Like we just need to talk about it.
And I think the thing with the options is I grew up in a very conservative situation, and I'm not knocking it,
Mm,
but I think when you're expected, there's black or there's white, and there was
yeah.
never really any gray areas. The older I
Hmm.
got, the more I pushed those black and whites. Like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Yes, you can do this and that, but why can we not do? I was always that one, like, well, why can't we do
Okay.
it this way? I never did good with like, if it was abstract art, yeah, I can do that, but you don't tell me how to do an art project and I'm supposed to be learning how to be creative. How much sense does that make? It makes no
Hmm.
sense. So I've always been the one to like be resourceful, at least when it comes to like, there's always a different way to do something. And there's always, 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 there's options literally for everyone, in my opinion. But some
Yeah.
people just don't know. They don't
Mhm.
know there's resources in their community.
Mhm.
And the way we kind of break those walls down is by making blogs or writing articles or
Mhm.
however we're choosing, to spread that message. But I just think that people need to know you don't just have to turn to medicine. Some people
Mhm.
maybe are healed every day just by doing yoga. You don't have to always do it these textbook cookie cutter, blanket type of solutions. You don't have to do
Mhm.
it that way. You just don't,
Yeah. Yeah.
in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah. No, that's I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you because yeah, we have options. And if
Yeah.
you've never heard that, it's like, oh, and that was something I remember one of my mentors, she was like, really, you're such a good worker. She's like, you never call off. I said, I didn't even know that that was an option to call off of work. She's like, what are you for real? I'm like, if you get a job, you need to go to work. She's like, absolutely. She said, but you can call off of work. And I'm like, I had no idea. Why did nobody tell me that? She's like,
That's
no, you
amazing.
have
That's
this. She's like,
amazing.
you can actually leave that job anytime you want to. You have something called free will. What?
Yeah.
I'm like, what? And I grew up in a really strict Christian home. And so I didn't know that. I'm thinking Jesus Christ is the only way.
Yeah.
And that
Yep.
was the belief until I'm hurting by the people who believe in Jesus Christ.
Right.
Surely there's a different way. Surely there's other things out there. And it
Yes.
was in that exploration where now at almost 35, I say, my spirituality, I'm sovereign. I said, I'm not a devotee to anybody because I've seen how those who are devoted to a certain God, whether it be Buddha, Muhammad, whoever, treat people. I said, I do not want to be associated with none of that. I said, so I say I'm sovereign in my spirituality and I'm okay with that. And I say,
Yep.
you could still pray for me in Jesus' name. I enjoy that. I said, but I'm sovereign in my spirituality because of the things that I've experienced and because I know that there's other options. And
Absolutely.
and then that's just what it is. And
And that's
so
why life is so great because I mean, you can literally do, I mean, within reason, you can
yeah.
literally do and choose what you want to do. Like that's something
Mhm.
I want my son to always, now sometimes the choice is not always going to be yours, but in
Yeah.
the instances that it is, there's so many choices. Don't
Hmm.
let someone tell you this is the only, because when someone tells me this is the only way to do something, give me 5 minutes. No, it's not.
Yep. Yep. I was that one. I'd be called a rebel. You're rebellious. We're
Yeah,
gonna pray the spirit of rebellion off of you. And it did not work. It did not work. And
I
so it was
can
just like,
relate. Yeah.
and so and but that's also when I was going to therapy and learning to be a therapist, I learned about a model called cognitive behavioral therapy, which really said,
Yes.
change your mind to change your life is what it meant to me. Your beliefs. And my therapist said,
Yeah.
Aurelia, it's your beliefs in things. Look at your beliefs and challenge those. Give yourself a different perspective. She's like, I'm not telling you to change it. I'm just telling you to consider everything else, to look at everything else and see which beliefs are no longer serving you, which beliefs are keeping you
Yeah.
where you are, where you're not happy. She said, and just recently somebody said, look at where you are and look at how it's serving you, how you're benefiting from where you are, and look at how you are being limited by where you are. And when
Yes.
you can look at both and be neutral about it, that's when, if you want things to change, they can. Or that's
Yep.
when you can find yourself just being content and maybe just being grateful for where you are. And I was like, oh, you know what? Actually, I do want more, but I do see how where I am is benefiting me and why I'm still here. But I also see how it's
Yes.
limiting me and why I want more. And it's like, oh, okay, but I can be neutral about it. I don't have to judge myself. I can have compassion for myself. And it
Yeah.
was that last part that they said is have compassion for yourself, understand these different things. And that compassion is really what really led to have for me, um, just me personally, having compassion for myself has helped my mental health. Just, girl, you are human. You can be spiritual, you can be super smart, academic,
Yeah.
you can be the best author, writer, whatever in your own brain, but you just that compassion,
Yeah,
that
it's
was
a life changer for
yeah.
sure. And
Mhm.
it's weird that I think, at least in my upbringing, there's just always a focus on do for others, do for which you should
Yeah.
do for others. But I
Mhm.
think I totally missed, the wagon, the boat for the self because it was
Yeah.
looked at, oh, well, you're selfish
Mhm.
or those feelings. I was always the sensitive one. I mean,
Mhm.
because I cry about something. And so that was like always my label. And so then you start to judge yourself. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm just being sensitive. And you dismiss and it just snowballs into a big old freaking mess by the
Yeah.
time you hit adulthood. And you don't know that you have options because your options were what your parents were choosing for you,
Yeah.
and, or at least in my case, that's what it was. And do you think I did that? No. When you say black sheep, you're looking at her. I got three other
Mm.
siblings who pretty much lived the way they were expected to. This
Yeah.
one, I was like, at night, I was like, bye, I'm out of here. Catch y'all later. I'm
Yeah.
gonna go figure out what this world's about and it was a horrible learning
Mm.
curve, but you know what? I would do it again.
Yeah.
I would never take that back for anything.
Yeah. 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 And it's these stories, I think, sharing them in writing or even through this podcast, I think it sets other people free. Like we were saying, or you were saying when you first started, is you share your stories. It also helps you, but it also helps others to know, just man, you're not alone in this. You're not alone in not wanting to meet somebody else's expectations for your own
Yep.
mental health. Like it's okay for you to care about your
Yes.
own mental health.
Exactly. And I think too, the thing with mental health is obviously it's not always so evident that somebody
Mm,
is struggling with those things.
yeah.
And that's even more reason to raise awareness that I've probably been a high functioning person in terms of like my depression and anxiety. I worked full-time jobs, did school, did all these things
Yeah.
at one time. But meanwhile, behind closed doors, like the loneliest, just
Yeah.
down on myself and the spiraling and all that stuff. So I think when you're able to shed some awareness on the fact that it's not like physical health. We know when
Hmm.
someone's got a broken arm. We don't know when someone's broken on the inside. Sometimes
Right.
these things manifest into physical things, but for
Hmm.
the most part, you don't know if somebody's struggling. And how will we know if we're not finding avenues to share these stories and experiences?
Yeah. Yeah. And the mom that I was just talking to, she was talking about her son. She was like, he was just a bottle of joy and was, gave advice to everybody and was a strong friend. And she said he ended his own life. And she was like, we knew that he was struggling, but he had this idea that he had to maintain that persona, that he had to just figure it out
Mm,
on his own. And as a
yes.
mom, she was like, as a mom, your children get to be a certain age and you can no longer make the appointment for them. They have to do it. And she's like, that's like,
Yes.
how is it mentally, how is someone who's struggling mentally going to make those appointments for themselves to get help? And so something that just kind of thinking about it because this is still fresh. I just spoke to her maybe an hour ago. Something that I remember my therapist told me was come up with a game plan. Like while you're feeling well, because it is an ebb and a flow.
Yes.
There will be a time where you might have a little bit of energy. She's like, when you get there, Write down the plan. What is your plan? What is going to be your will to live? What is going to keep you here? I said, I thought about ending. I said, but I also have goals. I said, I have goals that I want to reach. And what are those goals? Write down those goals. And she's like, she's like, do you think when you accomplish all those goals, you'll have more? I said, I probably will. And she's like, okay, write down those goals and let that be your will to live. But also, who can you call? Like, who is going to be on your
Yeah.
side? Who is someone that you can go to as a strong friend? Because I'm like, I identify with that. I identify very much as a strong friend, as the person people can go to for advice. But more recently, I started not giving advice. When people come to me, it's like, I'm sorry, I have no words to say. I can
Yes.
be the friend, and I've been telling people that like I'm in this season where it's just my duty to listen to you. It's my duty to just hold your hand. I have no words of encouragement. You call me when you need someone to just watch TV with you, or let's go walk laps around the parking lot. I have no words. Like, I will listen to you. And being able to do that for people in my life it's been helpful for them, but it's also been helpful for me because no, I don't want that S on my chest as Superman. I don't
Right.
want people to see me like that. Like, let me let
Right.
go of that. And so I tell people, like, if you're that strong friend, sometimes tell your people
Yeah.
you're weak. Like, actually, let me be human. Like, I'm not a robot. And I remember I lost a friend because of me telling her, like, girl, I'm not as strong as you think I am. I'm like,
Mm.
something had happened in my house. My kitchen had flooded, and we were supposed to be talking about goals. And I said, girl, I'm a little bit emotional right now. Like, my kitchen flooded the other day, and I'm still really upset about this. I just moved in. It makes
Ugh.
no sense that a pipe broke in the middle of me washing dishes. They said this, and I'm going off, and she's like, girl, it's gonna be okay. What? I must have hung up on her so fast, and she called me back. And she was like, why'd you hang up? I said, I'm not a robot. Yeah, I get everything's gonna be okay. I said, but right now I'm still
Yeah.
very upset. I was like, can you shut up and let me be upset?
Absolutely. Oh, that's
Couldn't
so
do
good
it.
that you
Oh, you're
share
being
that.
too emotional. Da, 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 da. I always call you for advice. Da, da. What? That wasn't a friend. Right. I had to learn
No.
later on, like, that's not a friend. That's not how people treat you. But I said, well, part of it is I had put on that persona of nothing ever goes wrong for me.
Yeah.
And that was where it was like, no, I gotta let people know the dark and the
Oh,
light and let people see I go through some stuff too, just like you do. I'm not always gonna be the strong one. And by doing that now, I'm like, okay, my mental health is better. By showing both parts, it's like,
aw.
okay, I can have a better, like, mental health, because being that strong friend is hard.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I don't know that I've really ever I don't know that I've really had that. It's been hard for me to form friendships and maintain friendships because
Mm,
mostly because of the depression, because that's really
mhm,
what
mhm,
gets the biggest hold on me and keeps me kind of like isolated. And so it's hard for me to keep up with people and return phone calls. And for the
mm,
longest time, I just labeled myself as like, a bad friend, but I
mm.
mean, a lot of it is I'm not choosing like, "Oh, I'm gonna be the crappiest friend I can be today." I'm not choosing that. My
Yeah.
brain is like messing with me. And not only that, I've been betrayed. We've all been betrayed by friends. And it's just,
Yeah.
especially as a survivor of abuse, that betrayal hits a
Mhm,
lot differently when you're on your healing journey. Like you just don't have the capacity for I at least don't, second, third, fourth, fifth chances. For
mhm,
me, depending on what you did, if I feel it's a deep enough betrayal, I can't mess with you anymore. I love you. God bless you. But I
mm.
can't take those chances because I've done it before and it's gone like a wrong way. So that's good that you were like, I'm working on that, the boundaries and being
Yeah.
firm with them. I had to set them with my family, which was like a weird situation. Again, being the black sheep,
Mhm,
I'm the one choosing these boundaries because I'm making all these issues up, that type of thing. But
mhm,
I was like, I have to, because again, it's not good for my mental health. I know I don't live up to expectations. It's exhausting to be at family functions. It just is, because I know my life and I'm not doing anything. I'm a single mom. I had a child out of wedlock. I didn't
Mm.
freaking rob the Smithsonian or do something crazy. I did what
Right.
millions of other, I'm not condoning it, but I'm just saying
Right.
I'm not the
It's
last.
not unusual. Yeah.
Right,
Mm.
exactly. But it's hard mentally to be around a group of people who you know they really don't approve of the path that you've taken, and that's your
Yeah.
family. And look, they're entitled. My parents were absolutely entitled to have certain expectations for their children. I am not knocking
Mhm.
that at all. However, for the child that didn't meet those expectations, it is very hard to come around a group of people where you really feel like the outsider. You don't like, are y'all just dealing with me because I guess because you have to, I'm your family. But there's
Mm.
another factor to that is I'm adopted.
Okay.
So that brings a whole girl, that just brings a whole other
Mm.
level to things. But I'm in a transition with that whole thing. But it's just for me, I had to set those boundaries, and
Mhm.
I can't, I just can't come around y'all all the time. Obviously I do because of my son. Those are his grandparents, his
Mhm.
aunts, his uncles
Mhm.
and stuff, and I will continue to do so. But I just, I can't go where I don't belong. And I wish everybody
Yeah.
would just, I know they love me and all of that kind of stuff. However, I wish everyone would just take off the mask for, let's say, 10 minutes. Let's
Yeah.
keep it real. I don't even know how I got on this tangent, but it's
That's
just
good.
writing, everybody write. It'll help you. I'll tie that in. But yeah, it's just, life, the way we're raised really shapes the beliefs I think that's where I was going with that whole thing. It just really
Mhm.
shapes our beliefs, and it really does limit our beliefs about ourselves right off the bat when you're raised in a certain environment, I think.
Yeah. 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 And all of that can impact your mental health. And for me,
Yes.
it was like, okay, let me get my mental health together because, like you said earlier, I have a daughter. I'm like, okay, what? I'll be damned if she ends up in a relationship like I was
Uh,
in. I will be. What? I remember praying to the Lord. I said,
oh,
listen, when I got out of my last, and I was in three different abusive relationships, I said, look, I said, God, you seem to have a pattern. I said, if you put me in another relationship like that, I said, I'm going to have a prison ministry. I'm going to have a prison ministry. I said, next time your son that you delivered or that I came across, he will be in heaven with you. And that was my prayer. And and since then, I said there was one guy and I noticed it right off the bat. I noticed the love bombing. I noticed all of the things and I said, no, we've got to end it because this is like playing with fire. And I said, I will not go there with you. I will not go there with you. I said, we're gonna end this right now because I know the prayer that I prayed.
yeah.
I said, I'm not gonna entertain it. And so I tell my dad all the time. And I remember telling my dad, I said, you know what it was for me? I said it was my worth. So we never talked
Yes.
about it. I had a stepdad and a biological dad. My mom still at the age of 15 raised us as a single mom. At 15 she raised me and my sister as a single parent. And so I said even then nobody talked to me about self-worth. I didn't know that I was worthy of good things. I thought I had to work for it. I had a mom
Yes.
who I thought, dang, I was never good enough for her even though straight A's, always on the, honor roll, always doing all these good things, overachiever. I was told,
Yep.
you're from a long line of classy women. And so we expect certain things from you. So having a baby out of wedlock, showing up to church pregnant, things like that was
Right.
you gotta earn this love and you're a disappointment. Those things. I said it
Yes.
was only until recently that I started exploring my worth and understanding that I'm worthy of good things. And I can, if I want, like, I remember the friend that I had that it's no longer my friend, I used to smoke weed and I had this really nice plate. I told her, I said, "Girl, I bought this plate for $20." And she said, "You're ashing on that plate." I said, "I'm worthy of doing whatever I want with this plate. I spent $20 on this plate, on one little plate." I said, "I can ash on this plate if I want to."
Right.
She was like, "Girl, why are you doing that?" I said, "Because I'm worth it. Like, I'm worth, if I want to do
Yes.
that, I can do that." And while that might have not been the best like example for me, I was learning that I'm worthy of having
Yes.
nice things and I can do what I want with the nice things that I have. And $20, you know, that might not be a lot of money, but at the time that was a lot of money for what I was going through. To be doing that to a, you spent $20 on this plate and you're ashing your little thing on your little joint,
Right.
girl. And so it was like learning that and so I said, "Dad, once I got that, once I started learning about my self-worth, those things that y'all didn't teach me, like you said, because learning about yourself, that self thing is was always attached to selfish. Self-worth,
Yes.
self-compassion is too close to being selfish, and you don't need to do any of that." And so it was like once I got with that, the mental health started getting better, and it was okay,
Yes.
that's the direction that I needed to go in, or that's the missing piece that I needed to not be in abusive relationships, or to spot when the relationship was going to go that way, or when I was chasing after a friend, or when I'm chasing after a lover, because there were just different dynamics where that was happening, and it was,
Yep.
"Girl, you better stop that. You are worth more than chasing after a friend or chasing after a man or whatever it was." And it was
Yes.
like, "Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah." Those boundaries started to get
Yes.
set, but even then, setting boundaries, that was hard for me as well because of the expectations and not wanting to disappoint people, still struggling with, man, if I say this, just recently I told a group of authors, I said, "Guys, I'm not publishing another book here with this group. We just finished our last book." I said, I didn't say I think I'm done. I said, "I'm done doing this. I want to put my energy elsewhere." And even saying that, I felt so bad. Just
Oh, I know what you mean.
like,
Yeah,
oh,
you feel guilty. Yes, because you don't want to disappoint
right.
other people because any good feelings, you have to like earn those. Like you said, you need to get
Mhm.
approval and then you're allowed to feel those feelings, or you need to have met this expectation and then you're allowed to feel.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, I get it. I'm the same way. If I have to say no to somebody,
Yeah.
I've even caught myself the other day. I wanted to say no. Someone was trying to sell me something. And I was like, oh, well, I'll think about it. And the next day I was like, girl, we're not doing this anymore. Remember, just tell this lady you're not interested. What
Yeah.
if she doesn't like it because of it? Who gives a darn? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But
Right.
I catch myself in the, I was a major people pleaser my
Yeah.
entire
That
life.
part. Mhm.
And it's like, I didn't want the damn gummies. I should have just told her like that day. And I was like, let's not waste another day and just tell her, like, you don't, if someone's going to befriend you because you're going to buy something from them, you don't need to be friends with that person,
Yeah.
you know?
Mhm.
So I get it. Trust me. And in my 40s,
Mm.
I'm just learning all these things, but better late than never, as they
Yeah.
say.
Better late than never. Yeah. 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 And we could go there too. Sometimes I think about that. I'm like, gosh, and it could just be me judging people, but I think when you get some of this, like this advice or these life lessons, you start looking at the other people that you're around, and a little bit of you judges them, or you see them. It's like, oh,
Yes.
I see, one of the authors I work with, she has a book called "Excuse Me, Your Unhealed is Showing." And it's like when you
Mm,
start healing, you can see other people's unhealed parts of them. And it's like, oh, okay. And I want to say I judge them in a little bit, but I think there's also a part of me because of the trauma that is aware, like, ooh, I can identify
yes.
this person's behavior, or I'm hyper focused on their words, I'm hyper focused on their
Yes.
movement. So even now I'm still like, okay, how do I navigate this? I, and then it's like I distance myself, I find myself isolating again, and it's like I'm telling myself, no, you have to find people that align with you. That, okay, you're
Yes.
seeing that and you can distance yourself, but get somewhere where you feel safe. What is it? And it's like I have to start reflecting and, okay, where do I feel safe? Well, I feel safe when I'm around people who are whatever it is. And I just list
Right.
it out and
Yep.
it's like, okay, these are the people that I want to be around, and then that's just what it is. And it's
And
just
it's
like,
come
okay.
as you are. Like I feel like there's always like I've always been the one probably to tailor who I am based on who I'm around.
Mhm.
Because you, as a people pleaser, maybe that's a people pleaser thing, I'm sure it is, but then
Yeah.
when you get out of that, it's like I'm coming as I am all the time, and y'all are
Yeah.
gonna you're gonna adapt to me.
Right.
That's how we're running this game now. It's the other way around. I'm not, well, we should all be adaptable, but I'm saying I used to always
Yeah.
just base my identity in that moment on my surroundings, because you learn to do that when you're in abusive relationships. You
Mhm.
know, oh shoot, they had a bad day at work, let me put on this persona of, oh, what can I get for you, or you know what I'm saying. So it's
Yeah.
like it's all, I we never stop learning is what I'm realizing. When I'm 80, I'm sure I'm going to figure out something useful that I should have known in my 20s.
Yep. Yep,
But
you never stop learning for sure.
that's just how it goes, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Well, this has been such a meaningful
Yes.
conversation. As we bring it to a close, is there anything else that you would like to share? Anything that we maybe didn't get to?
I don't think so. I think just a message for like aspiring bloggers. I'm going to tell you right now. I built my blog on Blogger, but I'm telling you, I had to do research on like robot tags. I still don't really know what that is, but all these weird things but I did it. I'm not a
Mhm.
computer genius. I'm not a tech savvy person per se, but I did it. I'm learning it. You can do it. You can do it. You can do it. Just there,
Yeah.
I'm broke, I'm doing it on a budget. Like I'm not
Mhm.
shelling out extra money for stuff right now. There's no more excuses, people.
Yeah.
Go live out your dreams and do what it is that you want to do.
That's it for today's check in. If this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend, hit that subscribe or follow button, and let's keep growing together. Hey, and if you're tuning in on YouTube, drop your after emoji in the comments and tell me what shifted for you. I'll see you next time on Miss Win Checking In, where creativity is a pathway to wellness.